This is not breaking news. This is not a scandal. This is not about one person. This is about something quieter, something structural, something that only becomes visible when the system is already under strain. For years, we were taught to watch for explosions, for coups, for tanks in the streets. But systems don't usually fail that way. They fail when rules stop binding, when authority keeps operating, but legitimacy quietly drains out. You don't notice it at first because everything still looks familiar. The buildings are still there, the speeches still happen, the procedures still run, and yet something essential has slipped. Tonight is not about what happened, it's about what no longer works. If you want to understand where this is heading, stay with me, because once this mechanism turns, it doesn't stop on command. And what comes next depends on whether anyone still knows who's actually in charge. Here's the mistake most people make. They think power lives in people. In offices, in titles. It doesn't. Power lives in coordination, in whether institutions still move together when pressure is applied, in whether rules still compel behavior when obedience becomes inconvenient. Right now, what controls the system is not loyalty, not ideology, not even fear. It's timing, when decisions are delayed just long enough to avoid responsibility, when authority is exercised just short of accountability. When everyone waits for someone else to move first. That's the frame we're in. The system is still functioning, but it's no longer synchronized. Courts speak, legislatures signal, executives stall, enforcement hesitates. Nothing is broken on paper, everything is misaligned in practice. And when that happens, the center doesn't collapse. It hollows out. You don't see chaos yet. You see overlap, contradiction, silence where certainty used to be. And that silence is not neutral, because once control shifts from law to leverage, the next move belongs to whoever is willing to push hardest. And that's where this starts to accelerate. This didn't happen all at once. That's the dangerous part. There was a time when lines were clear, authority issued orders, institutions complied, disputes were settled before they metastasized. And then slowly that rhythm changed. Compliance became conditional, enforcement became selective. Deadlines became suggestions. Nothing dramatic, nothing that triggered alarms, just a series of small accommodations, temporary exceptions, one-time delays that quietly became standard practice. Before, refusal was unthinkable. Now refusal is negotiated. Before, defiance ended careers. Now it starts fundraising emails. The system adapted to stress by loosening its own joints. And each time it did, it told itself this was resilience, flexibility, pragmatism, but systems don't grow stronger by tolerating non-compliance. They grow brittle, because every time rules bend without consequence, someone learns they can bend them further. And someone else learns they don't have to respond yet. That's how slow change works. It feels reasonable, until suddenly, it isn't slow anymore. And when the shift completes, the crisis doesn't announce itself. It just arrives. And by then, the old rules no longer know how to stop it. Then the system flinched, not quietly, not symbolically, all at once. Multiple institutions moved in the same narrow window, not to resolve anything, but to signal that patience had run out. Procedures were accelerated, emergency language appeared where routine phrasing used to be. Decisions that normally take months were compressed into hours. That alone tells you something was wrong. Because systems don't rush unless delay has become dangerous. You could see it in the choreography. Actions taken, then immediately insulated. Votes cast, then buildings cleared. Statements issued, then security tightened. This was not confidence. This was containment. And here's the key point. What happened wasn't a climax. It was a stress fracture. A moment where the system admitted, without saying it out loud, that normal timelines no longer applied. That ordinary enforcement might not hold. That escalation was now baked in. This is where people misunderstand the moment. They treat the shock as the story. It isn't. It's a symptom. Because when institutions move this fast, they're not trying to win. They're trying to get ahead of something they no longer fully control. And once that threshold is crossed, the next move is no longer procedural. It's reactive. And that's where the real danger begins. Here's what's actually happening underneath all of this. The system is no longer enforcing outcomes. It's managing risk. That's a subtle shift, and it changes everything. When enforcement works, rules produce consequences. Predictable ones, delayed maybe, but inevitable. When enforcement weakens, institutions stop asking what is required. They start asking, what can we survive? That's the hidden mechanism. Damage doesn't disappear. It's redistributed. Some actors gain time. Others absorb uncertainty. Responsibility diffuses upward while consequences fall downward. The people with the most leverage learn they don't need to comply. They just need to stall, to threaten instability, to make removal feel riskier than endurance. Meanwhile, institutions begin cushioning themselves. Emergency language, contingency plans, quiet coordination behind public neutrality. From the outside, it looks like restraint. From the inside, it's triage. And this is the inversion that matters. The system was designed to discipline power. Now it is calibrating around it. That doesn't mean collapse is inevitable, but it does mean the balance has shifted. Because once power realizes the rules are negotiable under pressure, pressure becomes the strategy. And the next phase isn't about legality. It's about how much strain the system can take before something gives. This is where the tempo changes. Everything speeds up, not because decisions are being made, but because delays are colliding. Signals start overlapping. Warnings contradict each other. Authority fragments in real time. Security postures rise. Crowds form faster than plans. Messages meant to calm begin to inflame. No single move causes this. It's accumulation. Each actor assumes someone else will absorb the risk. Each institution moves just far enough to protect itself, not far enough to end the crisis. That creates gaps, and gaps invite improvisation. You see it in how enforcement hesitates, in how language hardens, in how timelines shrink from weeks to hours. There's no announcement that control is slipping. You feel it instead, because once the system enters this phase, stability becomes conditional on weather, on timing, on whether one more decision lands cleanly or not. Nothing catastrophic has to happen. Just one misread signal, one overreaction, one refusal interpreted as provocation. This is the moment people usually mislabel as chaos. It's not chaos. It's a system running faster than its own safeguards. And once that happens, the next crisis doesn't wait its turn. It stacks. And whatever breaks next won't be the weakest part. It will be the part under the most strain. This is the part that reaches you, not as a headline, as a condition. Because when systems start managing risk instead of enforcing rules, the cost doesn't fall evenly. It moves outward, downward. It shows up as uncertainty you're expected to absorb, plans that stay provisional, decisions that never quite arrive. You feel it when authority sounds firm but acts careful, when timelines keep shifting, when the messages stay calm but the preparations say something else. This isn't abstract. It changes how you move through your day, what you trust. What you hesitate to assume will still work tomorrow. And here's the quiet truth. Systems under strain don't fail for everyone at once. They fail unevenly for people without buffers, without leverage, without the ability to wait it out. If you're paying attention, you can already see who is being asked to carry the uncertainty and who isn't. This is why understanding the mechanism matters, not to panic, but to recognize when stability is being borrowed from the future. If this feels personal, it should, because the next phase doesn't ask for your consent. It just arrives. Once uncertainty becomes domestic, it doesn't stay contained. Systems are watched closely, continuously. When coordination weakens in one place, it registers everywhere else, not as a moral judgment, as a calculation. Markets adjust before statements are issued. Allies recalibrate before reassurance lands. Adversaries test boundaries that used to be implicit. Nothing dramatic at first, just subtle repositioning. Because instability doesn't need permission to travel. It moves through assumptions, through risk models, through quiet shifts in posture. What used to be treated as temporary starts getting priced in. What used to be unthinkable becomes contingent. And here's the part most people miss. The system doesn't need to collapse to lose influence. It just needs to become unpredictable. Once that happens, every signal carries extra weight. Every hesitation gets interpreted. Every delay invites speculation. This is how internal strain becomes external leverage, not through weakness, through ambiguity. And ambiguity is expensive, because while uncertainty might feel survivable at home, it compounds abroad. It multiplies decision points. It narrows margins. By the time attention turns outward again, the environment has already changed. And the system discovers it's no longer operating in the conditions it assumed would still be there, which raises the question no one wants to answer yet. What happens if this doesn't stabilize? From here, there are only 3 directions this can move, not outcomes, paths. The first is adjustment. Institutions reassert coordination, not dramatically, quietly. through alignment, not confrontation. Rules begin binding again because enforcement stops hesitating. Timelines stretch back to normal. Uncertainty gets absorbed upward instead of pushed outward. It works, but only if pressure is relieved quickly. The second path is erosion. Nothing snaps, nothing resolves. The system continues managing risk instead of enforcing limits. Delays harden into precedent. Exceptions become architecture. Authority still exists, but it's conditional. Compliance becomes optional for those with leverage. Everyone else adapts around the instability. This path feels survivable until it isn't. The third path is rupture, not necessarily violent, but decisive. A moment where ambiguity collapses into action, where someone forces resolution, intentionally or not. This is the path systems stumble into when they wait too long, when adjustment feels risky, when erosion feels manageable. No one announces which path we're on. You only know in retrospect, because systems don't choose futures, they drift into them. And right now, drift is still happening, which means the most important decision hasn't been made yet. It's being delayed. This is where people usually look for comfort, for reassurance that the system will hold, that guardrails will activate, that someone, somewhere is in control. But systems under this kind of strain don't offer closure. They offer exposure. What's been revealed isn't a single failure. It's a pattern, a reliance on delay, on risk management in place of resolution. That pattern doesn't end when attention moves on. It carries forward into the next decision, the next exception, the next moment when enforcement feels too costly. Nothing here requires panic, but none of it allows complacency either. Because once legitimacy becomes negotiable, stability depends on restraint. And restraint is not evenly distributed. The danger isn't that everything breaks. It's that things keep working just enough while the core keeps thinning. If you want to understand what happens next, you have to keep watching, not for spectacle, for alignment, because the next signal won't arrive with a siren. It will arrive as another temporary choice. And whether that choice stabilizes the system or pushes it past the point of recovery won't be obvious in the moment. It will only be obvious after. Stay with this, because once drift turns into direction, there is no rewind. That's where we are.